dirt the way things are happening all over. We should get out of it and start reconstruction. And I may clarify right here that we are completely a non-political entity. We had aimed that we will be inviting majority students and younger lot Pakistanis and construct an underground state-of-the-art auditorium, a library, Jinnah library, worth its name. However, the technical committee is still pondering over it, how to go about it. And then we started off doing it the way we are doing it today. And in fact, in the recent past, we have held 3 functions, and because of which it was very largely attended. 3 of our members of the Board of Governors, they contracted corona. As a matter of fact, I'm very grateful to Mr. Liaquat Merchant, who was ill, and because of these functions, he was very tired, but he decided to come at least for a few minutes. Thank you, sir. May I now request Mr. Ikram Sagal to kindly moderate.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Commodore Sadiq Malik, Mr. Liaquat Merchant, Senator Quaid Iqbal, ladies and gentlemen. I can see an occasional lady here. We deliberately kept this small because this place is small, and therefore we arranged for live streaming, and therefore whatever is happening here is going out live to a lot of places. We looked at a lot of Commodore Sadiq Malik has talked about the Institute of Nation Building. We looked at what was happening from time to time at the Quaid-e-Azam Mazar, where people go there for a photo opportunity. But you know, we found that there was no real learning for which we could convey or could be conveyed to the younger generation of Pakistan as to how it all came into being. So we came across an idea of having the grandnephew of the man who created Pakistan, Liaquat Merchant, speak about Allama Iqbal, the person who had the vision for Pakistan, and have the grandson of Allama Iqbal talk about the Quaid-e-Azam, the man who created Pakistan. And I think that was to get to the real roots of where we started from in 1940. And I think I'm very grateful to both Liaquat and Senator Iqbal. Without hesitation, without this thing, by the time I finished the sentence, they said yes to it. And Senator Iqbal just came back from abroad, and he's just flown in for this occasion only. And so I'm grateful. And in these circumstances, I'm very grateful. What do we see happening around us? And I'm not going to comment on the political side or the economic side, etc. But really, where are we today? How far are we away from 1940? Leave aside 1947. How far are we away from the dreams and the aspirations that our forefathers thought about? And we really need to go back to the roots. And what better than these two to be talking about it? I'm very grateful to Liaquat. Liaquat was very unwell in the morning, really very unwell. And you know, he said, I will not be able to make it, but I will try. But later on he said. So in the meantime, I was thinking about what to do, because Senator Iqbal was already here. So I then you say, we in the armed forces learned ke pakpal bandobast, do a quick plan, and I turned to, I rang up Dr. Irfan Haider and requested him. And so, more than me, what I am going to do is that, moderation aside, after Liaquat has said his piece and Senator Walid Iqbal led seat, I am going to request Dr. Irfan Haider to say a few words on both the Quaid and the Allama Iqbal and comment on their speeches, right? And after that, of course, we'll have a question and answer session. So, without further ado, I request now Liaquat to kick off and talk about the Allama Iqbal.
Assalamu alaikum. Ikram Saigal, Chairman of Karachi Council on Foreign Relations, Vice Chairman of the Board of Management, Commodore Sadid Malik, Senator Walid Iqbal, son of the illustrious Allama Iqbal, distinguished guests. Before I embark upon saying what little I know about Allama Iqbal, or what I have read, my specialized topic is, of course, has been Jinnah all my life. But whatever I know about Allama Iqbal, before I get to that, I would like to exchange some pleasantries. I met Walid Iqbal for the first time today, and I hope to get to know him better as years go on. But I had the great honor and distinction of knowing his late father, Justice Javed Iqbal. Justice Javed Iqbal shared a platform with me in 2006 at Beach Luxury Hotel. We both spoke from the same platform on Jinnah, both of us. And once again in 2007, when we invited him as our chief guest for the Jinnah Award ceremony at Karachi. So I met him 2 occasions. He honored us by visiting our house and having dinner with me and my wife. Justice Nasser Iqbal, his wife, accompanied him to our house, and we were indeed very, very pleased and honored to meet both of them. So this is about the general background, that I've known your father in those days. Coming back to the topic which Ikram Saigal has chosen for today, I would begin by saying simply that while Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah is considered as Pakistan's founding father, I consider Allama Iqbal as the ideological father of Pakistan. Ideological because he was the one man who conceived of a separate Muslim state comprising of Sindh, Balochistan, Punjab and frontier in 1930. Way back in 1930, he conceived of this idea. He did not name it Pakistan. He called it a separate independent Muslim state where the Muslims of India could rise and achieve their goals. Prior to that, we had Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in Aligarh, who started the movement in support of the Muslims. In 1939, Mr. Jinnah made his last will and testament from Bombay, in which he left large sums of money mainly to educational institutions, which included Aligarh Muslim University, Sindh Madrasa, and Islamia College, Peshawar. The reason why he did that and also prepared and moved a trust, the Dawn Trust. Dawn was established by Jinnah. He established the Dawn Trust for one main reason. He wanted the Muslims of India to receive educated public opinion on all matters concerning India and the Muslim world. So that motivated him to establishing a trust. So here you see the two great leaders, Allama Iqbal, who in 1930 conceived of the idea of Pakistan. Later in 1932-33, Chaudhry Rahmat Ali, he was a barrister as well from England. In 1933, Chaudhry Rahmat Ali drew up a paper, a pamphlet, and circulated all over the place, in which he identified these four portions in India which Allama Iqbal had identified, and he called it Pakistan for the first time. In 1933, that pamphlet is there, and it is called Pakistan. The idea was the same as Allama Iqbal. The idea was the same as Jinnah. They wanted the Muslims to live there and thrive and achieve their goals, which I believe, from what they said and did, was to achieve political and economic independence and to freely practice and propagate their religious faith and beliefs. Having said that, what is the connection between Jinnah and Iqbal? Iqbal was an ideological person, a famous poet, Pakistan's national poet. He inspired people. He did not go out into the political fray. And when I say political fray, I do not mean the political fray we're witnessing today in Pakistan. Politics was very much more decent in those days and dignified. So he was the one who inspired Jinnah. I mean, Jinnah went away from India in 1936 to England and got fed up with politics and didn't want to come back. It was Iqbal who persuaded him to come back. In fact, before I go any further, there are several letters exchanged between Jinnah and Iqbal during the 30s. And the one that I consider relevant is the one which he wrote to Jinnah on 21st of June 1937, in which Allama Iqbal said to Jinnah in a letter, "You are the only Muslim in India today to whom the community has a right to look up for safe guidance through the storm which is coming to the northwest India and perhaps to the whole of India." So this is the faith and the trust which Allama Iqbal, the founding father of Pakistan, the man who conceived Pakistan, writes to Jinnah, "You are the only man who Muslims can look to for guidance to achieve their hopes and aspirations, and guide them through this." Unfortunately for all of us in Pakistan, Allama Iqbal passed away, if I'm not wrong, in 1938. In 1938, very prematurely, of some illness which he contracted in one of his tours, and he succumbed to it. Very unfortunate. But let there be no doubt in the minds of everybody here present here today and everybody in Pakistan that Pakistan has two national heroes, Allama Iqbal and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. There is no doubt about that. They both rank on the same footing, and they both deserve to be idolized and remembered at every stage in our lives. But for Allama Iqbal, but for Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and but for the Pakistan resolution passed on 23rd March 1940 at Lahore, you and I would not be sitting here today as free citizens of a Muslim independent sovereign state. So, gentlemen, I don't think there are any ladies present here. There are. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to once again reiterate that we in Pakistan, we means all Pakistanis, owe a debt of gratitude to Allama Iqbal for his guidance on the concept of a Muslim state, and to Jinnah for having struggled over the years, led the battled with the Congress, the British, and gave us our dreamland home state of Pakistan. On a lighter side, through the works that I have done since for the last 25, 30 years, as a student in India, when I was taken to meet Mr. Jinnah at the age of 7 by my grandmother, I didn't know what Jinnah was about and I didn't know what Pakistan was about. We only saw a tall, lanky man in a white suit coming and shaking hands with us and going away. Well, my interest was not there either in Pakistan in those days in Bombay. My interest developed only when I met Fatima Jinnah in 1964. And that's when she told me, what are you wasting your time in India? Come here. This is the country you should be living in. Very blunt. She said, why are you wasting your time in India? Anyway, then ultimately I did migrate. I was working with my uncle Jinnah's nephew in Bombay, practicing law. I did migrate here. But the interest in Jinnah and in Pakistan really overcame me in 1980 when the High Court appointed me as administrator of the estate of Quaid-e-Azam. That is when the interest started germinating and it picked hold. And till today, it has gone stronger and stronger and stronger, and I wish to continue with this interest and this campaign as long as I live. So, before I conclude, I would ask you to spread the message to your family, your children, and to all your friends who you meet, and tell them how important a role was played by Allama Iqbal in the creation of this country, along with Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Thank you.
Very well spoken, Dakat. And I think, given the fact that you were unwell, I think the words that came out really resonated with the passion and the feeling that you have, like you said, the germination of the idea in 1980. Many people have vision. Many people have vision. Many people who have a vision seldom live to create it. That's what happened to Allama Iqbal. But one thing I must tell you, that knowing Liaquat for many years, he was predecessor as the chairman of Karachi Council for Foreign Relations. And, I've looked up to him. He's been a friend for a long time. You can see the character of the Quaid-e-Azam coming down and down the years. And, I think one thing, a small thing, but, for example, even the tea and the samosas we have in board meetings and all, he does not allow it to be paid for. Either he pays for it once or I pay for it. He makes sure that nothing is charged to the administration. So I think it shows, the character shows. And similarly, I have great pleasure in inviting Senator Iqbal. Your father, was an icon also. Leaving aside your grandfather, whom Liaquat spoke about, your father was an icon, your mother was an icon, and it continues. And the way you reacted when I proposed this to you, because I told you that, look at this, so many years have elapsed, and we do not have the people who founded Pakistan speak about each other. You can speak about Allama Iqbal, and Liaquat can speak about Jinnah, but to speak about each other, to speak about your forefathers. And therefore, it gives me great pleasure inviting Senator Iqbal. Thank you.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम इय्याका नअबुदु व इय्याका नस्तईन। या अल्लाह, हम तेरी ही इबादत करते हैं और तुझी से मदद मांगते हैं। Honorable hosts for this afternoon, Mr. Ikram Saigal and Commodore Sadir, Honorable guest speaker, Mr. Liaquat Merchant, Senior Advocate, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I'm very happy to be here in Karachi. what would appear to be a critical juncture in Pakistan's history, Pakistan's political, constitutional history. And on a lighter note, I'll start first. As Mr. Ikram Sahil said, since I'm specially here all the way from Lahore, and Mr. Ikram Sahil said about the example that our father of the nation, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, had set in terms of austerity and proper use of national resources. Today, if you will be kind enough, please do send to me the bill for the samosas and the tea. I will pick up the tab. I am tasked to talk about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the father of the nation, the founder of our country as an independent state, and a great hero for all of us. And when I would be talking about Quaid-e-Azam, it would be not just about him as a person, it would be about two elements in Pakistan's history. The principles that gave us this country and the leadership that gave us this country. So talking about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah is like talking about certain principles and certain leadership. And as far back as one can go, the important milestones start in 1930 with the Allahabad address, and they see some sort of a culmination in the Lahore resolution, which was passed on the 23rd of March. Well, it was the annual session spread over 22nd, 23rd and 24th of March at Minto Park, now Iqbal Park, Lahore. And the resolution so passed was called the Lahore Resolution, later on became the Pakistan Resolution. And we just this week celebrated the 82nd anniversary of the passing of that resolution. We are celebrating the 75th year of Pakistan's independence. So it is through the personality of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah important to go back to those principles and to that leadership that gave us Pakistan. And because I think a starting point should be the 23rd March resolution. It had two substantive parts in 1940. First was about independence and sovereignty. It was a demand for independence and sovereignty. That's the first pillar on which the 23rd March resolution stands. The second pillar is about the protection of the rights of minorities. It is a demand and a promise. A promise by the Muslims of India that where they are in majority, they will protect the rights of the minorities, administratively, religious rights, administrative rights, economic, cultural, political, etc. Likewise, that promise was coupled with a demand in that resolution. That demand was that where the Muslims are in a minority, those rights will be protected by those who are in the majority. Those same religious and cultural and political and economic and administrative rights. And those two principles are expounded by Allama Iqbal in his address of 1930 at Allahabad on the 29th of December that year, 10 years earlier. And I quote to you, those are the famous words from that address: I would like to see the Punjab, Northwest Frontier, Sindh and Balochistan amalgamated into a single state, self-governed within the British Empire or without the British Empire. The formation of a consolidated Northwest Indian Muslim state appears to me to be the final destiny of the Muslims, at least of Northwest India. So that independence and sovereignty, the seeds of that had been sowed in 1930, which found their way into the resolution of 1940. On safeguarding of minority rights, the Allahabad address has other stuff in it also. But for this small paragraph, other than this small sentence or paragraph about independence and sovereignty, Allama Iqbal says, a community which is inspired by feelings of ill will towards other communities is low and ignoble. I entertain the highest respect for the customs, laws, religious and social institutions of other communities. Nay, he says in the Allahabad address, nay, it is my duty, according to the teaching of the Quran, even to defend their places of worship, if need be. He hasn't made the necessary reference, but it is believed that he was referring to Surah number 20 and ayat number 40, where in the Quran it is said, if God had not created the group of Muslims to ward off the others from aggression, then churches synagogues, oratories, and mosques where God is worshipped most would have been destroyed. I also want to submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, the consonance between the ideas of Allama Iqbal and Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Going back to 1930, I told you there are many other things in the address of 1930 other than that one paragraph about independence and the dream of a new state or a separate state. In 1929, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, then known as just Mr. Jinnah, presented his 14 points. The first of those 14 points said, the form of the future constitution should be federal, with the residuary powers to be vested in the provinces. This is 1929. The form of the future constitution should be federal, with the residuary powers to be vested in the provinces. On the 29th of December 1930, 1 year later, Allama Iqbal in the Allahabad address states, to my mind, a unitary form of government is simply unthinkable in self-governing India. What is called residuary powers, he writes in quotation marks, must be left entirely to self-governing states, with the central federal state exercising only those powers which are expressly vested in it. Ladies and gentlemen, as we take stock, of those principles and that leadership, where do we stand on all of these matters? I want to posit to you what Allama Iqbal said in 1930 about leadership in that same address. And at that time, he felt that the Muslims of India suffered from various crises. And the one that he refers to, he says, let me tell you frankly, this is towards the end of his Allahabad address. Let me tell you frankly that at the present moment, the Muslims of India are suffering from two evils. The first is the want of personalities. I'm leaving aside the second evil. He says the first is the want of personalities. The community has failed to produce leaders. And then he describes what the leaders should be. He says, by leaders, I mean men who, by divine gift or experience, possess a keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam, along with an equally keen perception of the trend of modern history. A keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam, number one, with an equally keen perception of the trend of modern history. And then he says in the Allahabad address, such men are really the driving forces of a people. But they are God's gift and cannot be made to order. In 1930, he felt that the Muslims of India had no leader. And in 1936, in May, I'm sure my father, when he was invited by Mr. Liaquat Merchant on both occasions, would have repeated that story from his own personal history, which I only reiterate secondhand, that in May 1936, he writes that my father, in his memoirs, he said, my father, Allama Iqbal, told me an important personality is coming, and he knew I was fond of getting autographs of people, so he said, when he comes, you will be invited inside, and you present your autograph book and get this person's autograph. So he said, I went inside the room when this guest came, and I saw this elegantly dressed man with a very sharp vision, and a lady in a white gharara, a very respectable lady in a white gharara. And I went inside and I gave my autograph book I put it in front of the guest, and the first question came in English, are you also a poet? And he said, he was 14 years old, maybe 15. He said, I'm sorry, he was 11 or 12 years old, my father. He said, no, sir. He said, then what do you want? Next question came. Then what do you want to become when you grow up? So a child of 11 or 12, when such a powerful and personality, such a great, awesome personality is sitting there, had no answer. So he laughed and asked his host, your son is not answering. I asked him, what does he want to become when he grows up? So his host, Allama Iqbal, told the guest that he will not answer. Because he is waiting for you to tell him what to become when you grow up, when he grows up. So my father writes in his memoirs, that was my first meeting with the father of the nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Mohtarma Fatima Jinnah. At that time, the concept or the name of Pakistan had not emerged yet. And hardly anybody knew, this is important, he said, hardly anybody knew Mr. Jinnah in the Punjab. But I could tell from that one meeting, how much my father respected him. And 1 year later, when Allama was in his deathbed, there's another story about which there is popular folklore. Again, my father was asked by Allama Iqbal that today Pandit Nehru is going to come and see me. So I can't get out of bed. You go and receive him along with my attendant. So he said, we were waiting in the veranda. I asked my father, who is Pandit Nehru? So he said, Pandit Nehru, just like Muhammad Ali Jinnah is the leader of the Muslims, Pandit Nehru is the leader of the Hindus in India. So he said, we were waiting in the veranda, and Pandit Nehru got out of his car, and two Congress leaders, husband and wife, came with him. And he passed me, I said, Assalamu alaikum. So he joined both his hands and said, Namaskar. And he put his arm around me and he walked until my father's bedroom. My father didn't go inside for that meeting, but what is believed and what is known and what is said about that meeting is that Pandit Nehru came and sat cross-legged on the floor along with, obviously, his two companions also sat cross-legged on the floor with him for reasons of protocol. So Dr. Iqbal said, Pandit ji, please sit on the sofa. He said, no, Dr. Iqbal, your level is this and my level is this, let me sit here. And then in the course of the conversation, he had come to ask after his health, Mizaj Pursi in Urdu. So in the course of the conversation, he is known to have said, Dr. Iqbal, who knows about Muhammad Ali Jinnah over here? You are the real leader of the Muslims. When Dr. Iqbal heard this, popular folklore has it, when Dr. Iqbal heard this, he was so angered and his face was so reddened in anger that he said to Pandit Nehru, this is what you have come to do my Mizaj Pursi about? You come ask about my health? I am a soldier of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. You please leave my home. And that is how because he had found that personality which fit into the qualities that he had articulated in his address of 1930. He had decided that this man is going to lead the Muslims. Then no force on earth could make Dr. Iqbal back off from there, including the temptation that Pandit Nehru had thrown at him that you are the real leader of the Muslims. And he was asked also at that point, this is the mid-1930s, 1936 and 1937, that why have you chosen this leader? Why this man? And Allama answered, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, because he is incorruptible and unpurchasable. Na to woh beimaan hai aur na woh kharida ja sakta hai. And I want to now just make brief references, as Mr. Liaquat Merchant already did. There are 13 letters that Allama wrote to Quaid in 1936 and 1937, which are published. They give a blueprint of what he had in mind about the nation that he had dreamt of, and about the leadership and the steps that he was wanting Muhammad Ali Jinnah as Quaid-e-Azam. At that time, he was still not known as Quaid-e-Azam to take. But Quaid-e-Azam himself had preserved those letters. He had them published in 1946. He wrote the preface, and he directed the publisher that all the proceeds of this booklet, it was published, the letters were published as a booklet, will go to the funds of the All India Muslim League that he was leading. In the preface, Quaid-e-Azam writes, the letters which form the subject of this booklet were written to me by the sage, philosopher and national poet of Islam, the late Dr. Sir Muhammad Iqbal, during the period May 1936 to November 1937, a few months before his death. This period synchronizes with a very eventful period in the history of Muslim India. He writes, his views, Quaid is writing about Iqbal, his views were substantially in consonance with my own and had finally led me to the same conclusion as a result of careful examination of the constitutional problems facing India, and found expression in due course in the united will of Muslim India as adumbrated in the Lahore resolution of the All India Muslim League, popularly known as the Pakistan Resolution, passed on 23rd March 1940. From the letter dated 20, and all the letters start with the words, my dear Mr. Jinnah, and end with the words, yours sincerely, Muhammad Iqbal. He writes, my dear Mr. Jinnah, I know you are a busy man, but I do hope, Mr. Liaquat Merchant has already provided an excerpt, but I am providing you a bigger excerpt. I know you are a busy man, but I do hope you won't mind my writing to you so often as you are the only Muslim in India today to whom the community has the right to look up for safe guidance through the storm which is coming to northwest India and perhaps the whole of India. He writes, my dear Mr. Jinnah, I have no doubt that you fully realize the gravity of the situation as far as Muslim India is concerned. The League will have to finally decide whether it will remain a body representing the upper classes of Indian Muslims or Muslim masses who have so far for good reason taken no interest in it. Personally, I believe that a political organization which gives no promise of improving the lot of the average Muslim cannot attract our masses. He writes, the problem of bread is becoming more and more acute. The question therefore is, how is it possible to solve the problem of Muslim poverty? He writes happily, there is a solution in the enforcement of the law of Islam and its further development in the light of modern ideas. This is the letter dated 28th of May, 1937. He writes, my dear Mr. Jinnah, after a long and careful study of Islamic law, I have come to the conclusion that if this system of law is properly understood and applied, at last the right of subsistence is secured. The right of subsistence is secured to everybody. But he says the enforcement and development of the Shariat of Islam is impossible in this country without a free Muslim state. This has been my honest conviction for many years, and I still believe this to be the only way to solve the problem of bread for Muslims as well as to secure a peaceful India. And in conclusion, he writes, for Islam, the acceptance of social democracy. For Islam, the acceptance of social democracy in some suitable form and consistent with the legal principles of Islam is not a revolution, but a return to the original purity of Islam. He writes, my dear Mr. Jinnah, Muslim India hopes that at this serious juncture, your genius will discover some way out of our present difficulties. 28th of May, 1937. He writes, dear Mr. Jinnah, my dear Mr. Jinnah, the Congress President has denied the political existence of Muslims in no unmistakable terms. The other Hindu political body, the Mahasabha, who I regard as the real representative of the masses of the Hindus, has declared more than once that a united Hindu-Muslim nation is impossible in India. In these circumstances, it is obvious that the only way to a peaceful India is a redistribution of the country on the lines of racial, religious, and linguistic affinities. A separate federation of Muslim provinces, reformed on the lines I have suggested above, is the only course by which we can secure a peaceful India and save Muslims from the domination of non-Muslims. He writes, why should not the Muslims of Northwest India and Bengal be considered as nations entitled to self-determination, just as other nations in India and outside India are? The letter dated 21st of June 1937. He writes on the 7th of October 1937, my dear Mr. Jinnah, we are living in difficult times and the Indian Muslims expect that your teachings will give them the clearest possible lead in all matters relating to the future of the community. He writes on the 30th of October 1937, one of the last letters, my dear Mr. Jinnah, we must carry the work of organization more vigorously than ever and should not rest till Muslim governments are established in the 5 provinces and reforms are granted to Balochistan. So, the kind of correspondence, the exchange of ideas, the thoughts and feelings Allama had about Jinnah, and the kind of messages he wanted to convey, because he felt that this leader was the embodiment of those qualities that an ideal leader is possessed of. The keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam, the equally keen perception of modern times, and 6 more things that Iqbal has said about leadership. Nigah buland, sukhan dil nawaz, jaan pursoz. These 3 qualities: vision, Nigah buland, sukhan dil nawaz, a great communicator, jaan pursoz, somebody who can empathize with the masses. Yehi hai rakhte safar mere karwan ke liye. 3 more qualities: sabak phir pad sadakat ka, adalat ka, shujaat ka, sadakat, truthfulness, honesty, adalat, justice, शुजात, courage, लिया जाएगा तुझसे काम दुनिया की इमामत का. So, in conclusion, the principles and the leadership that emerged between Allama's thoughts and Quaid's personality and his actions. Number one, independence. Number two, sovereignty. Number three, self-determination. Number four, safeguarding minority rights. Number five, a federal structure. Number six, a social democracy, which is a return to the original purity of Islam. Number seven, a leader who grasps the spirit and destiny of Islam and also grasps the trend of modern history. Number eight, a leader who can ride through the storm. Number nine, a leader who is incorruptible and unpurchasable. Number 10, a leader who believes in the politics of the masses and not of the upper classes or the elites. Number 11, a leader who is organized. Number 12, a leader who is a visionary. Number 13, a leader who is a sharp communicator. Number 14, a leader who has empathy with others. And number 15, a leader who is truthful, just, and courageous. These were the principles. This was the leadership that gave us Pakistan. When we take stock on the 26th of March 2022, we need to ask ourselves these questions. How much have we adhered to these principles? And how much of these qualities are possessed by our existing leadership? There lies the answer, and there lies the solution to the overcoming of all our challenges. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address.
Senator Quaid-e-Azam, what a tremendous speech. And I tell you, worth all the effort to bring you here. Because you have expressed, like Liaquat before you, exactly the feelings that we wanted to go forth from this room. That 2 generations later, the values do not change. The vision remains the same. If the people change. And I just want to tell you one thing about guarding the minorities. I have never said this. I have a company called Hut, which does cash transit vehicles that armored cars. After the incident where a church was bombed and set fire to in Murray, we started guarding churches free of cost. We at one time were guarding 125 churches free of cost. That was by itself very good. When I went and offered the 600 people who were doing the guarding, because it was being done on Sundays, and I offered them that you must take overtime for 4 hours. They flatly refused. They said it is our duty as Muslims to guard the minorities, and we will not accept a penny. And today we guard maybe 35 churches still, and the good thing also I must go on from there is that when these people go out to those churches from 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the Christian churchgoers, they bring picnic baskets for them to feed them. So it is a tremendous this thing, and I really feel that we go back to the vision of Allama Iqbal and the Quaid, the feelings they had, and the truth, about now we try to change states into state and things like that, like what Liaquat and Senator Iqbal have talked about. Because first of all, it was the Northwest Frontier State. Bengal came afterwards, and the Quaid, and there was a time when the Quaid seriously gave permission to 3 people Sarwarji and Fazlul Haq and of course Abul Hashim to try and this thing. But the British put in a condition because they said even if one vote is there against this in the Bengal Assembly, that even though it was originally for a separate state, that is Bengal and Assam, West Bengal, East Bengal, and Assam, it was not allowed. So in the end, then they decided to have a West Pakistan at that time, separate state in one Pakistan. So I think we've seen a lot of history today, and now I'm going to request Dr. Irfan Haider to say a few words. I request, because we've just gone over our time, to keep it short for about 5 to 7 minutes. I want you to talk about it, and I want, because you are one of the eminent people who know about both much more than we do. So I think it would be a great thing to listen to you. Thank you.
Shukriya Ikram Sahab. Thank you. Great people and the great legacy being carried by the people sitting over here. I too have my father as a student at Aligarh from 1932 to 1938. He did his BA and LLB from there. The talk just now brought to me memories of Ganjhai Giramaya by Rashid Ahmad Siddiqui. So on the death of Allama Iqbal, he wrote the feature in that book, and he quoted one of his couplets over there, which was सिखलाई फरिश्तों को आदम की तड़प, सिखलाई फरिश्तों को आदम की तड़प जिसने आदम को सिखाता है आदाब खुदाबंदी. That तड़प सहने चमन में आशियां में शाहसारों में जुदा पारे से हो सकती नहीं तब्दील सीमा में. That was the vision, that continuous change, energy that is visible in जो पारा अगर कागज पे रखें तो उसमें जो होती और चेंज होता है. So what is the message for us? So I, being the Vice Chancellor of Ziauddin University, and the name Ziauddin also stands for a person who was at Aligarh, and he was the first Pro-Chancellor in 1920 when it converted from MAO College to the university, Aligarh University, and then he was for 12 years the Vice Chancellor of Aligarh University. Now, carrying the legacy of such great people forward is a great responsibility. And I think our generation has not done justice with that legacy. And because we had not done justice, that is the reason why we are here. So I will just relate the same. I think one of our basic, in the education sector, I think we have lost track of the basic lesson that was given. कि इल्म की शम्मा से हो मुझको मोहब्बत याद. आजकल हमारी पैसे की शम्मा से हो हमको मोहब्बत याद. और सारी यूनिवर्सिटीज़ का काम लोगों के अंदर उस पैसे की दौड़ में शामिल कर दिया. दूर दुनिया का मेरे दम से अंधेरा हो जाए, हर जगह मेरे चमकने से उजाला हो जाए, तो हर जगह मेरे जेब की वजह से मेरे घर में तो उजाला हो जाए, बकिया सब जाए भाड़ में. So unfortunately, this is what we have done with our education and continue to do that. और जहाँ वो बात आती है कि निगाह बुलंद, यानी कि that lofty vision which transcends time and space, ज़मान और मकान से बुलंद वो vision جو شخصیات سے بلند ہو، آپس کی کدورتوں اور آپس کی لڑائی جھگڑوں سے بلند ہو، آپس کے اختلافات سے بلند ہو، ایک ایسا ویژن جو زمان اور مکان کو ٹرانسینڈ کرتا ہے، نگاہ بلند، اور اس کے اندر وہ اسپرٹ ہے، جیسے کہ ولی صاحب نے ابھی فرمایا کہ وہ اسلامی روح اس کے اندر ویژن میں سرایت کرنے بغیر وہ ویژن زمان اور مکان سے بلند نہیں ہو سکتا۔ اور اس کے بعد جو دوسرا سب سے اہم مقام ہے وہ صرف کمیونیکیشن کی بات نہیں، سخن دل نواز، میری بات لوگوں کے دل میں گھر جائے، دل کو متاثر کر، شاید کہ تیرے دل میں اتر جائے میری بات، تو دل موہ لینے بات ہے۔ انسپریشن کا مطلب یہ ہے، آج کل ہمارے سخن جو ہماری تقاریر ہیں اس میں گالم گلوچ، استہزاء، تضحیک، تذلیل، بہتان، الزامات، جھوٹ اور اس سے لبریز ہماری تقاریر ہیں، تو وہ سخن دل نواز کہاں سے آئے گا جو لوگوں کے دل کو جوڑتا ہے، لوگوں کو آپس میں قریب رکھتا ہے، فالوورز کو، دوستوں کو تو ساتھ رکھتا ہی ہے، دشمنوں کو اپنے گرویدہ بنا لینا، یہ ہے سخن دل نواز۔ اور جاں پرسوز اس ایمپتھی کو کہتے ہیں جو لوگوں کے دکھ درد میں شریک ہو، خوشی کے اندر ان کی شرکت کرے، دکھ میں ان کے شریک ہو، ان کے دکھ کو اپنا دکھ سمجھے، ان کی غمجوئی کرے اور ان کی تکلیف کو اپنی تکلیف سمجھے۔ یہ جو تین ہیں، اور میر کارواں کے لیے اس کے علاوہ اور تیسری چوتھی چیز کی ضرورت نہیں ہے، لیکن انفارچونیٹ ہم ایسے افراد، میں خود یونیورسٹی کے وائس چانسلر ہونے کی وجہ سے مسلسل اس پریشانی میں رہتا ہوں، جو ذمہ داری میرے پاس 6000 اسٹوڈنٹس کے ساتھ ہے، کیا میں اس کو پورا کر رہا ہوں یا نہیں؟ یہ ایک پرسنل کوشچن۔ کیا میں نے ایسے چند افراد تیار کیے ہیں جن کے اندر وہ میسج جو اقبال نے کیا تھا ان میں ہے؟ اقبال کی پی ایچ ڈی ڈیزرٹیشن 6 مہینے کے اندر اپروو ہوئی ہے، وہ ستمبر میں غالباً پہنچے ہیں جرمنی کے اندر اور نومبر میں ان کا ڈیفینس ہو گیا تھا۔ یہاں ایچ ای سی والے اقبال کو تو ابھی ڈیزرٹیشن ان کی اپروو ہی نہیں کرتے، معلوم ہے آپ کو؟ ایچ ای سی کے رولز کے مطابق اقبال would not have gotten that۔ تو انسان کے علم کو سمجھنا، یعنی کہ جو ان کی ماسٹرز کا مقالہ تھا اس کو اس قابل سمجھا گیا کہ وہ پیے گئے، تو ہم لوگ تو بہت دور چلے۔ تو ہمیں صرف یہ دیکھنا ہے کہ کیا ہم ان پرنسپل سے کیا اقتصاب کر رہے ہیں۔ بے باک صداقت ہو، بے لوس محبت ہو، بے باک صداقت ہو، سینوں میں اجالا کر دل صورت مینا دے۔ وہ دل صورت مینا کہاں سے آئے گا؟ وہ سینوں میں اجالا کہاں سے آئے گا؟ اقبال کی یہ دعا ہے، اور ہماری بھی سب کی یہ دعا ہو۔ اور یہ جو لیڈرشپ کے جو 3 اجزاء تھے، یہ قائد اعظم کے اندر انہوں نے دیکھے تھے۔ وہ زبان عوام کی نہیں جانتے تھے، لیکن وہ ان کی دل کو کنیکٹ کرتے تھے۔ وہ ویژن جو تھا وہ اتنا اوپر تھا، اور ایمپتھی تھی جس کی وجہ سے لوگ ان کے تقاریر سننے جاتے تھے چاہے ان کو سمجھ میں نہیں آئے، کیونکہ وہ دل کی آواز تھی، اور دل کی آواز دل کو سمجھاتی ہے۔ تو ہمیں جو اس وقت چیلنج ہے، لوگوں کو صرف ہم یہ 3 لفظ کے مطلب بتائیں نا اپنے ارد گرد جو لیڈرز ہیں، تو میرا خیال میں کافی افاقہ ہونے کی ضرورت ہے۔ اور ہم جو لیڈرشپ کے کورسز کرا رہے ہیں اپنی کلاس میں آنے سے پہلے ابھی آئی او بی ایم کے اندر ایک چھوٹی سی میری ٹاک تھی، اس کے اندر میں نے یہی لیڈرشپ کا کورس تھا، تو اس میں تھا کہ کیا لیڈرز فیل ہوتے ہیں؟ تو یہ مجھ سے دیا گیا، تو میں نے کہا لیڈرز فیل نہیں ہو سکتا۔ وہ لیڈر جس کا جو ویژن ہے وہ آفاقی ہو، جو ٹائم اینڈ پلیس سے آگے ہو، جو دل کے اندر اثرات پیدا کرتا ہے، وہ ایک آدمی کے وہ چارج کر دے، اپنی چنگاری اس کے اندر شفٹ کر دے، تو وہ شخص جو ہے 2 یا 3 جنریشنز بعد بہت بڑے بڑے کام کر سکتا ہے۔ تو लीडर वो नहीं होता जो एक्स चीज अचीव करे, लीडर वो होता है जो लोगों के दिल पे हुकूमत करे, और दिल पे हुकूमत भी नहीं करे बल्कि उनके दिल को इस तरह से मोहे कि वो सेल्फ प्रोपेल्ड या ऑटो पायलट के ऊपर हों, ताकि वो अपनी खुद विजन्स बना सकें, और वो उन प्रिंसिपल्स जिनको बहुत बेहतर तरीके से, मुझसे कहीं ज़्यादा बेहतर तरीके से वलीद इकबाल साहब ने अपनी मुख्तसर से इस तकरीर में बयान किया है, उन प्रिंसिपल्स के मुताबिक मैं इसमें एक और बात कर दूं। अभी मैं देख रहा था जब पढ़ रहे थे तो लाहौर रेजोल्यूशन के टेक्स्ट के अंदर आखिरी पॉइंट के अंदर एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बनाने का भी जिक्र था। अनफॉर्चुनेटली हम हर दफ़ा बैठ के उस कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के खतो खाल को आगे पीछे करने की कोशिश कर रहे होते हैं, तो और ये भी एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है हमारे लिए, और इसको हमें इंशाल्लाह इसी तरह से आगे बढ़ाना है। शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत, थैंक यू, थैंक्स अ लॉट इकराम साहब, दूसरे हाजरीन, आई वोंट थैंक यू फॉर इनवाइटिंग मी।
Um, you know, this idea was floated to me in the morning by Dr. Allama Iqbal, and she gave a few names. And you know, when I rang up Dr. Irfan Haider, he didn't take a moment to say yes. Except he said, "Is it the Ikram cycle?" And I said, "I don't know, I'm the Ikram cycle or the Ikram cycle." But certainly, and thank you. It was very stirring. We'll just have a couple of questions which like from the audience. If somebody wants to ask a question of either Liaquat or Senator Waleed Iqbal, it is your prerogative if you want to do that. Yes, please. Yes. So just 1 second. इधर से आ जाए, इधर से आ, सामने से आ जाए। So please identify yourself so that for the
Sir, I am Ijaz Chaudhary, retired Commodore from the Navy. My question is, when great Allama Iqbal started suggesting to the great Muhammad Ali Jinnah, at that time, Jinnah was at the top of peak of his career in the law and judiciary, and barrister was at that time when he was given this big problem of making Pakistan. So was he politically that mature because he was a great lawyer? So was that his leadership qualities or a combination of political acumen that steered him to negotiate with the British to make Pakistan?
That you have raised will be answered both by me and
Right.
you must remember when you question whether Jinnah was capable of meeting the task that was given to him by the people, by the Muslims, by Allama Iqbal, you must remember that Jinnah started his life as a lawyer. He was a parliamentarian a member of the Indian Legislative Council, and it started in the early 1900th, 20th century. He was a member of that legislative body. He was a very fine parliamentarian. He then joined the Congress Party for a number of years, maybe a decade or 2 decades. He then started advocating that India should remain united. He was called by the leaders of India as the best ambassador for Hindu-Muslim unity. He represented India at the roundtable conferences with Allama Iqbal and the Aga Khan as an outstanding Indian Muslim. So politics was part and parcel. And before that, I forgot to mention, when he was in England, he was a private secretary to Dadabhai Nauroji, the first member of British Parliament in England. So his grooming has been there from the beginning in the art and nature of politics, from the student days. And that continued when he became member of the Indian Legislative Assembly. Then he got into the Indian Congress Party. Then he functioned as a best ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. And it was only when Mahatma Gandhi started maligning him and sidelining him and referring to him only as a leader of the Muslim minority community in India that he started to part ways with the Congress. He then ultimately joined the Muslim League and then quickly rose to prominence. So Jinnah had all available opportunities to be trained not only in the profession of law, not only in the study of the Constitution, but even in the art of politics. I hope that answers your question.
I was trying to find that place in my notes, just so that no doubt remains. My answer would be short. I believe at the time, especially after 1930, that at least Allama Iqbal, as a scholar, intellectual, and a leader of the Muslim community, decided that Muhammad Ali Jinnah would be the only person to lead the Muslims, the only person capable of doing that. There were a combination of factors. We have all, it was the multifaceted personality. His outstanding and sterling career as a lawyer and his political acumen, both. But coupled with that, I will again reiterate, I mean, I know whose words these are, and I know what he meant, that he believed that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, later Quaid-e-Azam, possessed a keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam, along with his legal acumen and his political acumen. And he had, at that he was possessed with an equally keen perception of the trend of modern history. And there are parallels in the lives of Iqbal, the thinking of Iqbal and Jinnah, both. Iqbal himself was an Indian nationalist until 1903, 1904, when he wrote Sare Jahan se Achha Hindustan Hamara. And then from 1905 to 1908, he went to study in Europe, in England and Germany. This is just before, a few years before the First World War. And his view of nationalism changed completely. And in that sense, he was a little bit ahead of the curve than Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah in understanding this. And he wrote in a letter in 1909 to Raja Krishan Prasad that I used to think that the communities can coexist. And this is as early as 1909. But I think that is an idealistic dream, and in reality, I do not believe it is possible for both communities to coexist in India. They have to go their separate ways. So at that time, there were even differences that Allama Iqbal had expressed about Jinnah. And in those years, between 1910 and 1920, it is not really found anywhere. He even wrote a poem which was a parody on Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, because he didn't take him seriously enough. But it changed 2 decades later in 1930 and beyond. So all of those qualities that have been mentioned here, 6 qualities, which aside from the keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam and keen perception of the trend of modern history, the vision, the communication, the empathy, the honesty, the justice, fair play, and the courage and guts that Muhammad Ali Jinnah possessed, all combined together for Iqbal to put his full weight behind and to never waver. Thank you.
जी please. नहीं नहीं आप करें जरूर अभी.
Sorry, maybe I've done this on purpose, that there was one other subject, because it is an extremely important subject, that I wanted to touch upon. And I already know what Mr. Liaquat Merchant has written about it, but I still wanted to present his view. And I want to ask that on the 10th of July, or 10th of June, 1947, there is a month or two before the independence, so 10th of July or 10th of June 1947, there is a handwritten note in the diary of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, which says, presidential form of government. And is underlined, it says, more suited for Pakistan. So I will present this question, what Mr. Liaquat Merchant thinks, that did Quaid-e-Azam actually want and wish for and envisage a presidential form of government? And if so, great. If not, then why not?
Thank you. I'll be happy to answer that. In fact, that particular note of Mr. Jinnah in his own handwriting forms part of this book, which I'll be presenting to Senator Fareed Iqbal as a gift from me. Those handwritten observations of Jinnah are something which a reflection of his thoughts, passing thoughts in his mind as he was sitting somewhere. We do not know where he wrote this. That's not identified. But it was an observations of his mind while he was sitting somewhere. He's written a number of things. He also talks what is the obligations of a state. Is it to provide life? He said no. As Aristotle says, it is to provide the citizens with a good life. Now coming down to the question of a presidential form of government as opposed to a parliamentary form of government, I recently wrote a letter on this to the press, and which I clarified that Mr. Jinnah in February 1948, prior to his demise, he addressed the people of the United States of America. And one of the questions that he had to answer was, what will the future constitution of Pakistan be like? His answer was very precise and clear. He said the constitution of Pakistan will be what the people want it to be. But I am sure it will be a democratic type. Pakistan will not be a theocratic state. It will be a democratic constitution in which will contain the essential principles of Islam. He did not clarify in much detail what the essential principles are, but in subsequent messages given at the Karachi Bar Association and other places, to him, the essential principles of Islam were honesty, integrity, justice, fair play, and equality. So he wanted these principles to be incorporated in the Constitution of Pakistan, but he said very clearly, it will be what the people want it to be. My argument in my letter to the editor in response to somebody else, he wanted these the same question as Senator Iqbal was, that the people of Pakistan, through their elected representatives in 1973, passed a constitution of Pakistan. It was with the consensus of all 4 provinces. If that was passed by the parliament with the consensus of all 4 provinces by the representatives of the people of Pakistan, that is the constitution that Mr. Jinnah said should be.
Mr. Ikram Sahib, if I may.
Please.
Okay, as I said, I will, Allama Iqbal, ये एक सवाल उठा दिया गया है, तो बड़ा अच्छा सवाल है कि अल्लामा इकबाल की आवाज़ की रिकॉर्डिंग जो, ये मैं 9 नवंबर 2020 को ऐवान सदर में भी अर्ज कर चुका हूँ कि उस प्लेटफॉर्म से जहाँ तक ये पहुँचाया जा सके, सदर पाकिस्तान भी वहाँ मौजूद थे। आज मैं इस प्लेटफॉर्म से भी अर्ज कर रहा हूँ, इवन दो वॉइस रिकॉर्डिंग उस वक्त तक आ गई थी अल्लामा इकबाल के इंतकाल के वक्त, लेकिन अल्लामा इकबाल की जब 100th बर्थ एनिवर्सरी 1977 में थी, तो उस वक्त threadbare this matter was looked into here in the archives of Radio Pakistan, in the archives of All India Radio, in Doordarshan and everywhere in India, because there was a relatively friendly government of Morarji Desai in those days. In the records of the BBC, Allama Iqbal's voice is preserved nowhere. And I have it on good authority, and if you get any message on WhatsApp or any other platform or forum through the social media or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, it is fake. It is 120% fake, because Allama Iqbal's voice has not been preserved anywhere. On the 1st of January 1938, on All India Radio, a New Year's message from Allama Iqbal was read out. He had by then lost his voice, and he wrote that message in English, but it was read out by somebody else. So just to reiterate, Allama Iqbal's voice is not preserved in any form anywhere, and if you receive it in any form, you can be sure to know that it is a fake and it is not authentic. But what I want to come back to, because I said I did this on purpose, the system of governance in Pakistan. मैं लियाकत मर्चेंट साहब के व्यूज़ चाहता था, और मैं आपको अपने व्यूज़ भी पेश करना चाहता हूँ। एक तो इस बात की मुझे तसल्ली हो गई कि ये जो इबारत, और मैंने अभी देख लिया फ़ोन में कि द डेट वाज 10th of July 1947, a handwritten note, presidential form of government more suited for Pakistan. This is what Muhammad Ali Jinnah, at that time Quaid-e-Azam and about to become the Governor General of India, he wrote that. This is an authentic ये जो है note. जी 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 I'll elaborate. Just bear with me. The note is authentic. It is found in authoritative researched books and also in government archives. I submit to you that Quaid-e-Azam in 1947 fully understood what was going on. He understood that Punjab was being divided. He understood that Bengal was being divided. He realized that there was a Congress-led government in the NWFP, now KP, and Sindh and Balochistan were facing separatist movements at that very time when he wrote this handwritten note. So therefore, to foil India's nefarious designs, Quaid's intention was that Pakistan needed, in his view, Pakistan needed a sound political system, a solid political system, a strong political system. And we all know that Mountbatten wanted to become the Governor General of India, both India and Pakistan. And in one meeting, he said to Quaid that under British law and parliamentary democracy, the Prime Minister is the center of power, and the Governor General is the ceremonial head of state. So he said to the Quaid that if you become the Governor General, public opinion in Britain and India will turn against you. And to this, Quaid-e-Azam indifferently said, and I quote, "I will be the Governor General of Pakistan, and the Prime Minister will do exactly what I tell him." This is found in Larry Collins and Dominic Lapierre's book, Freedom at Midnight, page 232. I also want to submit to you that on the 17th of January 1948, in a meeting of the Central Cabinet presided over by Quaid-e-Azam, the cabinet members candidly expressed their views and their opinions, and a convention was unanimously passed on the 17th of January 1948 by the Central Cabinet. And the convention was about the powers of the Governor General. The convention said that every decision on policy and principle will be taken in a cabinet meeting presided over by the Quaid as Governor General. The convention also said that in case there is a difference of opinion between the Quaid and the cabinet or any cabinet member, Quaid's decision shall be final and binding on the cabinet and on the minister concerned. The convention also gave Quaid the authority to summon the Secretary General of the Government of Pakistan and the Secretary of the Ministry, and that Secretary or Secretary General was bound to present any file or record to the Qaid as he desired. If the Qaid, the convention further provided that if the Qaid were to order that any matter is to be kept pending, then it would be kept pending until the Qaid ordered or directed to the contrary. Finally, the convention was confined to the Qaid's personality, and it was to continue in effect until a constitution were enacted. This is in the cabinet meetings record, Cabinet Division Islamabad, Q35, Volume 2, page 565. This cabinet decision makes it abundantly clear that at least Qaid himself, leave aside that handwritten note, over and above that, Qaid ran the affairs of the state of Pakistan under a presidential system as opposed to a parliamentary system. That is what the circumstances warranted. The Qaid also exercised sole control over all matters involving the rehabilitation of refugees from the tribal areas and the princely states constituting Balochistan. Even though in a parliamentary system, a governor general cannot exercise control over any division of the state. If the Qaid had wanted, if he had supported the parliamentary system, he would, like Nehru, have become the first Prime Minister of Pakistan, like Nehru did of India. So I believe in my heart that the Qaid believed that, not only believed that the presidential form of government was more suited to Pakistan, but during his life, after Pakistan had gained independence and he became the head of state, he ran it himself as a presidential system. So I believe in my heart, and I have no quarrel with the fact that the 1973 constitution is a unanimous one. But I think we and the citizens of Pakistan need to ask whether this constitution has delivered, or whether there is just become a vehicle or an instrument of furthering personal interests, sectarian interests, provincial interests, and of course horse trading and blackmail. Maybe, I raise this question, maybe a time has come to turn under the constitution, Article 40 or 42, to the people of Pakistan in a referendum. Are you satisfied with the system, or do you want a new system? And maybe we should have an election of a constituent assembly so that we can give Pakistan a new constitution and a new system which is not fraught with these frailties and these challenges and these dishonesties and blackmail that we are all faced with. Thank you.
I think we've got very little time now. All right, good luck.
I thought like gentlemen, we had agreed that we would not make this forum into a political discussion. I'm sorry, Senator Walid Iqbal, I regret that you have chosen to make this political, but I will not answer that, because we don't have to. This forum at the Board of Management, Quaid-e-Azam House, is a non-political organization, and so is Jinnah Society. To close this chapter once and for all, the 47 observations of Jinnah have been brought to an end, and the cabinet notes and memorandum that you referred to have also been brought to an end, because the last observation, the last on the subject, is of the 26th of February 1948, when Mr. Jinnah, for whatever it is worth, as the Governor General of Pakistan said, the Constitution of Pakistan has yet to be framed by the Pakistan Constituent Assembly. I do not know what the ultimate shape of this constitution is going to be, but I am sure that it will be of a democratic type, embodying the essential principles of Islam. Today they are applicable in actual life as they were 1300 years ago. Islam and its idealism have taught us democracy. It has taught us equality of man, justice and fair play to everybody. We are the inheritors of these glorious traditions and are fully alive to our responsibilities and obligations as framers of the future Constitution of Pakistan. In any case, Pakistan is not going to be a theocratic state to be ruled by priests with a divine mission. So here is a final chapter to this argument about whether Pakistan should be a presidential form or a parliamentary form. And this was followed. The Constituent Assembly framed the constitution. It was overruled in 1956 after it was passed by a dictator. Then The 4 provinces framed the constitution, and I'm afraid that is the final word. If there's going to be any change, it will have to come from within Parliament. Thank you.
I'm going to use my prerogative to bring this debate to an end, please. No, please. I'd like to, I'd just like to bring this to you because I think we can go on and on for the next 12 hours also. You know, in your wildest imagination, with all due respects to Liaquat and Senator Quaid-e-Azam, in our wildest imagination, neither Allama Iqbal or Muhammad Ali Jinnah thought that our beloved legislators would overnight turn into horses, you know. So if they turn, they could not, even in the nightmares, they could not have thought about it. So I think we've had a very good this thing, and I think in the, let us say, in the last exchange, also the democratic way of disagreeing, you know, with respect to each other, right? That is the essence of it all. In the end, it doesn't matter what the thing is, that democracy. We need democracy. We do not need an authoritarian state, right? We need democracy. And I think if you look at it, you know, I must end here. Before that, I have a request. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for this being here at this event. Obviously, the room was crowded, so we had invited limited number of guests, but this was live streaming. We, of course, a lot of material will be available tomorrow. I'm sure our media people, the mediators, always do a good job, and I wish to acknowledge our people, like within our, from Jinnah Society and from KCFR, Liaquat Merchant. I wish to acknowledge Commodore Sadiq Malik, whose work has been absolutely brilliant and wonderful, because it is he, along with a team of people led by Colonel Ashraf, who has arranged this at short notice, always been a terrific thing. I also wish to acknowledge senior people from KCFR, Admiral Khalid Mir, Air Marshal Riazuddin Sheikh, Dr. Irfan Haider, everybody. I can name a lot of people here, and I'm very grateful to you for coming. Thank you very much. Please join us for a cup of tea outside.